Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the June 17 meeting of the Ann Arbor City Council. If you're able, please rise and join us for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would our clerk please call the roll of council?
Councilmember Hayner.
Here.
Councilmember Bannister.
Here.
Councilmember Griswold.
Here.
Councilmember Lum.
Here.
Councilmember Grant.
Here.
Councilmember Eckerman. Mayor Taylor.
Here.
Councilmember Eaton.
Here.
Councilmember Nelson.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Present.
Councilmember Rumlally.
Here.
We have a quorum.
May I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda? Moved by Councilmember Rumlally, seconded by Councilmember Lum. Discussion of the agenda. Councilmember Smith.
I would, let's see, I would like to withdraw DC 2.
DC 2 withdrawn. Further discussion of the agenda. All in favor of the agenda as altered?
Aye.
All opposed? The agenda as altered is approved. Are there communications today from our city administrator?
Mayor, with respect to the long agenda, I'm going to keep the comments brief. There are some periodic reports that are attached to the city administrator's update dealing with the police report, a crosswalk report, and some other items of interest. Council should be aware that our city clerk is not here tonight. She is up at the clerk's convention. She will be honored at the next meeting. I only bring that up not to spoil the surprise, but because I won't be here to celebrate her excellence as well, as Jackie was the State of Michigan Clerk of the Year. So you'll get a chance to celebrate that next time. I am not ruining any surprises. The press release has already been put out, but I do want to acknowledge, while I am here, what a pleasure it is to work with her. So that's all I have.
We now come to, I have no introductions today, so we now come to public comment reserve time. Public comment reserve time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment reserve time, one needs to have signed up in advance by contacting our city clerk. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. And finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council today, we'd be delighted to provide it to you. Our first speaker is Ryan Hughes.
Hi. So we have 3 road reconfigurations on the agenda tonight, including a protected bike lane, which I'm excited about. Now, before the City Council votes these down, I wanted to remind us why it is that measures like this are being considered, and that's because of safety. Reconfigurations like this are part of an effort to make our roads safer for everybody. Pedestrians and cyclists, yes, but also for cars. And it works. There's plenty of evidence of this and little doubt amongst experts. In the case of these particular reconfigurations, you can see in the memo attached to tonight's agenda that they were following the standards of the Federal Highway Administration and the Michigan Department of Transportation, not the Communist Manifesto or the Satanic Bible. Now, it's good to follow evidence, because if you trust your gut, well, maybe one person's gut says to do one thing, and then the next person ate a spicy lunch, and so their gut says to do something else. That's why, if we're going to oppose these road reconfigurations, we have to decide: is it because we don't believe in the science, or because we value car traffic above safety? Well, I can tell you with confidence that here in Ann Arbor, we value safety. How do I know that? Because the city conducted a statistically valid National Citizen Survey last year, and fully 84% of the respondents said that they're okay with adding a minute to their drive time in order to reduce pedestrian, cyclist, and motorist crashes, injuries, and death. In fact, some people were okay with further delays than that. 66% of people said that they're okay with increasing their drive times by 3 minutes. But we don't have to go that far. All the delays added by this project are less than 1 minute. So this project should be okay with fully 84% of the people in town. Now, some of you may have been hearing from constituents who are not okay with this project, and that shouldn't surprise us. We knew those people existed. The survey told us that 16% of the people feel this way. Well, congratulations, you found them, I guess. But this is a serious engineering decision. When you're building a passenger jet, you set the requirements for what you want the jet to do, and then you turn it over to qualified engineers. You don't get the designs back and then say, well, my gut says to use number 8 bolts instead of number 6. We told our engineers that what we wanted was safety. The engineers said, well, this is how you get safety. If your gut says something different, well, I suggest you eat a less spicy lunch.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jennifer Barch.
Thank you. I'm actually a staff member at Glacier Hills Senior Living Community, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the residents of Glacier Hills regarding their concerns about the proposed roundabouts on Earhart Road. So a lot of these are quotes directly from the residents. The first one was, please no more roundabouts. They're concerned about reducing 2 lanes to 1 lane on Earhart Road. Another comment was bikers on Glacier Way use sidewalks even though there are bike lanes on Glacier Way. Bikers use sidewalks on Earhart Road, sharing with pedestrians with no issue. Current left turn lanes work well on Earhart Road. They're concerned about the roundabouts because they create problems for safety for both pedestrians and bikers. I think one of the main concerns, residents cross Earhart Road to walk in the neighborhood across from Glacier Hills, and they're worried about being able to navigate that roundabout and walk over into that neighborhood. They're concerned about buses not being able to turn around on that roundabout, as well as our delivery trucks that come onto our campus and moving trucks. The last comment was roundabouts do not increase mobility options, and it doesn't increase safety options for all users. And finally, they had some suggestions. More signage to indicate speed limits on Earhart Road, mark all pedestrian crossings, cut back vegetation more frequently, move up the date of resurfacing Earhart Road, and please patch that road for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Erica Briggs.
Hi, my name is Erica Briggs. I serve on the board of the Washtenaw Bicycling Walking Coalition, and I'm here as well to talk about the road reconfigurations. You'll see I handed out a packet to each of you. There's one that looks like this. It's a little bit of a summary document for the different projects that you're considering on Traverwood, Green Road, and Earhart. And then there's also a Strava heat map. If you have any questions about whether or not these segments are actually heavily used by bicyclists and other non-motorized traffic, there's clear evidence that they are. And then there's also a snapshot of the segment on Green Road from our bike map that clearly indicates that there's a real gap there. And so how these projects help to benefit that. So just to go through that sort of summary document for you, there's a lot of things factors I know you're considering tonight. And some of the key ones have already sort of been touched upon. The federal highway guidance, each of these clearly meets that guidance and is well under the threshold for acceptable criteria. Doesn't meet our master plan goals. That's something I know that comes up a lot around this table. Yes, it's part of our non-motorized transportation plan. I think that's a little short.
Is that 3 minutes? My guess is that was tacked onto the other. 2 minutes, is that enough? Is that enough? Please,
Great, thanks.
carry on, thank you.
That's okay. So, does it meet our master plan goals? Yes, it's part of, advances our non-motorized transportation plan recommendations and our sustainability goals. Has it been supported by a transportation commission? Yes, all of these have gone to the transportation commission. I know there's some questions about whether or not they saw this survey results, but in terms of their independent feedback, none of them had concerns about this. Does it meet the recommendations for our professional engineering staff? Yes, these are in front of you because they think that these are the best projects for our city. So then it's, comes down to weighing whether or not these projects have, public support, which is something that I know that you consider a lot around this table. And 2 of the 3 projects actually have overwhelming public support. The one on Earhart and also on Traverwood. So despite the comments that you heard about from Glacier Hills, where my mother-in-law is also a resident, and we go there and have experienced near crashes there, those sentiments don't reflect the sentiments of everybody who's at that facility. But when you look at the survey and the open house results, what you see is that 64% support or highly support testing lane conversions and adding protected bike lanes. And they also support adding roundabouts there and testing that out. So when it comes to public support, that's clear, that project has it. When it comes to Traverwood, that also has overwhelming public support. Green Road is the one that I would anticipate you should have the most discussion around, because that has what could be characterized at the best as maybe lukewarm support. And so I think that that does merit more discussion around this table. And so what I ask you to look at is what goals are we trying to achieve in our city? You can see that there's a gap in our non-motorized network there. We know that road diets, I've listed out some of the reasons we really love road diets. That's not us at WVWC. That's why the Federal Highway Administration loves them. These are quotes taken directly from them. Reducing speed, improving pedestrian safety, reducing crashes at crosswalks, making biking more accessible, increasing livability, and reducing crashes, particularly for older drivers. Those over 65 actually experience less crashes when there are road diets. Further, we've seen success in our own city around road diets. I have a stat here around Platte Road. So when you consider all the factors, I think that this is really all of them that are advancing our goals. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Derek Thorne.
Good evening. My name is Derek Thorne. I'm the president of Eastern Michigan University's Federation of Teachers. I represent roughly 167 members in the city of Ann Arbor. I'm here tonight to speak to you on behalf of the Huron Valley Area Labor Federation regarding the pulled Resolution DC-2. I know it was pulled. It's good to hear that it was pulled this evening, but I do want to just take a moment and outline the Huron Valley Labor Federation's position on the resolution to join the County Solid Waste Authority. One, the Huron Valley Area Labor Federation on the 11th, just this past Tuesday, voted unanimously to oppose the city of Ann Arbor joining this new County Solid Waste Authority. We believe that joining the authority violates our understanding of the resolution against doing so, which contracting out work that a majority of this council has previously voted on. It is unclear how the city of Ann Arbor would use its one vote to stop contracting to non-union providers, given the likely majority of a mostly conservative, the other majority of the conservative municipalities that are likely to sit on that authority. And we think that if such provisions exist that would allow the authority to exist and still contract out and give Ann Arbor the authority to weigh in on providing union labor in these instances, that those provisions should have been shared with your folks here in the city of solid waste, who work in solid waste, with the Huron Valley Labor Federation, so that we could engage with the council in good faith conversations about how to make something like this work. So we would hope that if those provisions exist, now that it's been pulled, we would have some time to hear about them and have some further conversations around Ann Arbor moving in that direction. And finally, the city of Ann Arbor did hire a consultant for roughly $250,000. We know that that consultant is within weeks of releasing that report and their recommendations. And we are curious, maybe there isn't as much haste now, but we're kind of curious why there is haste to do this. It does seem highly suspect to us. The authority isn't going anywhere without Ann Arbor's support. And we would like to know why we're spending the money on this consultant and then jumping the gun. So I am glad to see that the resolution was pulled this evening. Thank you for doing that. We're certainly open to hearing from you and look forward to having more conversations around this. Thank you for your time and have a nice night.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Curtis Morris.
Start? Okay. All right. Thanks for taking the time. Mayor Taylor, City Council members, and City Administrator. For those who do not know me, I'm Curtis Morris. I am the Union President for ASME Local 369, who represents the City of Ann Arbor municipal employees, and also I serve as a delegate for Huron Valley. I want to first thank you guys for pulling the D6-2 resolution to approve the Washtenaw Regional Resource Management Authority. As Derek stated previously, both as Huron Valley and also ASME Local 369, we did have some concerns on that. I remember last year, around roughly last year, that City Council made a resolution to, it was 7-4 vote to stop the privatization of solid waste, which I do truly appreciate City Council doing that. A few months ago, during one of the City Council meetings, this Washtenaw Regional Authority came about, and it was almost a unanimous decision by City Council to say, hey, we're going to actually table this and wait until we actually get the recommendations from the consultant that we paid $250,000 for. I am very grateful that I did have a huge a speech to discuss D2, but I'm actually glad that y'all decided to pull this. Like Derek stated, I would love, as one of the union leaders, to have further conversations with City Council on this matter, if it does move forward, to just get the input from the union standpoint and our concerns on this. I know I have spoken to some individuals on council about it. I would love to speak to all the council members just to hear our viewpoint on it, and also have that dialogue from City Council standpoint as well, to get an understanding on why y'all possibly want to move forward with this. With that said, I just look forward to continuing our relationship with the union, the City Council, the mayor, and also the city administrator, and just continue the great work that we're all providing. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Blaine Coleman.
If the camera operator would do me the courtesy, please show this sign. Okay, this is part of the message. On June 17th, 2002, I came in here demanding boycott, divestment, and sanctions against the apartheid state of Israel. June 17th, 2002. Today is June 17th, 2019. We've been coming in here for 17 years, and the City Council has refused to listen to our demands to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel. The City Council has refused for all those years to even give us a public hearing on the Boycott Israel resolution. The City Council has thrown all its weight into smothering the Palestinian people, into making sure that Israel can finish its final solution of the Palestinian people. This City Council, based on those 17 years, I am pretty sure in my own mind this is a racist City Council. When it comes to Palestinian human life, this is a Ku Klux Klan City Council. That's my experience, and Julie Grand just ran away from the room into the workroom because she cannot stand to hear the truth. Is that good governance? Now she's back. Thank you. Now she's back. It's good governance to listen and to act for human rights. She can't even make eye contact. Now she has. Now she has.
She should be.
Now she has.
She's ashamed and she should.
This City Council is a racist City Council which will stop at nothing to deny the Palestinian people the smallest human rights resolution. I'm proud to have stood for 17 solid years with the beleaguered people of Palestine. It's the highest honor to stand with Palestinians like Ghassan Kanafani, who Israel killed with your tax money. He was a towering journalist and literary figure of Palestine. His weapon was his pen. You and Israel killed him. You and Israel killed Razan al-Najjar. This woman here, the most famous paramedic of Palestine. who is trying to save the lives of human rights marchers. Just a few months ago, Israel killed her with your support. Boycott Israel.
Our next speaker is Mojan Savabiasfani.
I too have been coming here for a very long time, maybe not 17 years, but definitely 15 or more. I've been demanding that this body that sits here show mercy to children of Palestine. Palestine, Gaza is being bombed as we speak with American money, with American political support. Israel has annexed Golan Heights and called it Trump Heights. This is abominable. The world is in an uproar. If Americans are totally oblivious to these facts, it does not make it any better, makes it worse. In my opinion also, this city council and many before it, they have acted in a racist manner. They're racist. And they have been protecting Israel, a Nazi racist state, which will be no more at some point. But it is to our shame if we cannot bring the freedom for Palestinian people sooner. Today, Israelis shot a 7-month-old baby. And to make the things worse, put it in ways that Americans maybe understand, you are paying for this slaughter at the rate of $7,000 a minute, $7,000 a minute. While you languish without appropriate homes to live in Ann Arbor, Israelis get close to free housing. They get free education. They get free health care. All of those people of the United States are deprived from. So those of you who can't send your children to school here because it's too expensive, remember that Israelis, with your tax dollars, send their children for free education. They have free health care, what you don't have in the United States. So I say, be a human, stop funding Israel, but also realize if you stop it, there's a lot of goodies that you are now sending Israel's way that you can keep here. And I realize why Ms. Julie Grant might be ashamed, because she is on Human Rights Commission, and she has done nothing, just sit there and say that she's for human rights, but in reality, she supports every means to shut us up and to not allow a public hearing on crimes of Israel. If anybody starts discussing anything, Israel is damned. Israel is damned.
Thank you.
But they won't let us speak. And you can see that the mayor right now will not give me an extra 2 minutes
Thank
to
you.
plead for people of Palestine. He will not. He will keep banging his gavel.
Thank you very much,
To
ma'am.
me, what he has done is nothing short of racism.
Ma'am, thank
You
you.
are racists, all of you, against people of Palestine.
Ma'am, thank you.
And you don't say thank you to someone who just called you a
Ma'am,
racist.
thank you.
Do not thank me. I don't appreciate you thanking me. I don't appreciate a racist calling me, thanking me for what I've said, which is that you are all racist.
Are there communications from council? Councilmember Griswold.
Yes, I have 3 good news items tonight. The first one is there was a joint meeting on June 6th to address the 1,4-dioxane pollution in this community. We will be meeting again jointly. That will be the county, the 2 townships, the city of Ann Arbor on September 12th. In the interim, I'm asking that our city attorney provide a monthly report that would be in closed session that would give us the expenses occurred to date for this case, as well as any results that have been achieved as a result of our consent judgment. Number 2, in the month of May, there were 0 pedestrian crashes that were serious enough to report to the police. This is the first time in my memory we've had 0 pedestrian crashes. There were some crashes that weren't reported to the police that were minor, that people witnessed and called me about. But I am just thrilled that we've reached 0, and I think that's more reinforcement for our Vision Zero program moving forward. The third thing is I will be in Lansing tomorrow assisting Representative Ronnie Peterson in getting co-sponsors for a bill that will provide a uniform crosswalk law for the state of Michigan. Recently, Kalamazoo adopted an ordinance that's very similar to ours, but it includes that a pedestrian must stop before entering the crosswalk. So now we have at least half a dozen different unique crosswalk ordinances in our community, and it'll be a real benefit if we have a uniform law. Thank you.
Councilmember Hayner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try, let me start with the happy stuff, like Councilwoman Griswold did. I picked up this fantastic rainbow kitty pin at the Ann Arbor Comic Arts Festival, which was at the library this weekend, and I think it's fantastic how many creative opportunities for creative expression there are here in the city, and so thanks to the library for that. And it also I saw this one, it kind of stood out because it was in honor of Pride Month here in June, and I don't know if anybody else got to catch it, but it was the biggest parade I've ever seen in Detroit. The Pride Parade was enormous, and so thanks for that. And just sometimes we do a resolution for Pride Month, and I think once we've kind of established it, we don't have to, but I just want to give a shout out to all our friends in those communities. I was excited to hear that concerns over our the PFAS in the river, and that MDEQ, now Eagle, has kind of put forth, has resulted in the folks here at Parks putting in a wash-off at the down there at the Cascades, at the base of the Cascades. So they had a drinking fountain in place, and we kicked a little hand wash, foot wash thing off over there in case people feel like they want to wash off their hands and feet after exposing them in the river. And it's really not, it's not an exposure issue, and the MDEQ tells you to, enjoy the river and recreate and fish and do all those things, but they do tell you don't eat the fish, and they recommend a hand wash after being in the river, and I think that's just good common sense. And so thanks to Parks and our staff for getting that together and doing that. And then I want to address something I saw about last week. We spoke a couple meetings ago about a development up in Ward 1, and Councilwoman Bannister and I were the two who opposed that. It was called a Bristol Ridge. And part of my opposition to it was because it was sort of underparked by design by our ZBA. But the other part was the concerns I had over the loss of natural features that always come with this type of development, because unless it's redevelopment, we're doing green space development here in town. And, I took a little beating on that kind of scantily written article on MLive, but for having concern over nature and considering that the primacy of humanity on this planet might not be the best thing for the planet. And I strongly believe that it isn't, and I think that the folks in our Office of Sustainability will say the same thing. And we've committed millions of dollars in spending to overcome humans' primacy over nature, even here in Ann Arbor. And I was presented with sort of a housing false equivalent. Someone said, well, did you complain, where did all the animals go when you bought your house, Jeff? And it was a dual false equivalent, and these things are usually put forward by folks in the real estate and development community. First of all, I bought a used house. My house was built in 1947. I was the fourth occupant of that house. And so you'll have to ask somebody 4 times ago. So that's a false equivalent, because I'm talking about new housing. And my lot that was developed out of some fringe farm fields in 1947 is not comparable to a lot that is developed out of a green space here in the fully developed Ann Arbor in 2019. And so those two things that's a false equivalency. And so I do feel for the creatures that were displaced by my house. And I've done all I can, including put in rain gardens and butterfly gardens and all sorts of things to encourage that kind of habitat again on my own property. So I wanted to push back on the real estate folks who point and wag a finger at people who have deigned to buy into used property here in the house and also want to complain, or actually what I don't want to do is complain, but I want to do better. I want to do better for our climate action plan, and I want to put natural capital values on green space here in town, and I hope to be moving those ideas forward through planning. Thank you.
Councilmember Grant.
Thank you. You'll It didn't go. Thank you. I wanted to first thank the many constituents in Ward 3. I've not had a chance to respond to all of your emails, but who reached out about the 2857 PUD that's coming to, 2857 Packard, PUD that's coming to planning. I will be getting back to you later in the week. Just a friendly reminder to all that school is now out, so there are lots of younger people on our streets and on bikes and as pedestrians, so please do be looking out for all of those young people who are no longer in school until September. And I did want to point out, you'll see CC1, and if Councilmember Hayner wants to jump back in after this, we are presenting to you nominees that will be coming to the July 1st meeting. It's the resolution to appoint members to the Center of the City Task Force. Councilmember Hayner and I were privileged to have 42 applicants for 9 spots, and we really did look to the language of the resolution as well as the supplemental questions on that application that were guided by input from the Parks Advisory Commission, which was a process that we decided at this table. We tried to bring some balance. We have really, I think, a range of residents and backgrounds and perspectives on, in terms of the Center of the City Task Force. We had some really interesting young people that applied for it as well. So I'm excited to see some youth voices that I hope you'll support on July 1st. If you do have any questions about it, we also did decide to recommend having council members one from Ward 5, Councilmember Hayner, Ward 1, Councilmember Hayner, one from Ward 5, Councilmember Smith, as the property tends to intersect right around where those ward boundaries are. So we thought that was helpful because we do tend to hear a lot from those constituencies. But we do have, at least within the nominees, representatives from each of our 5 wards in the city. All of the nominees are city residents. And so I did reach out to all of those who weren't nominated, and have heard back from many of those folks, so I thank them as well. Many of them have expressed enthusiasm to participate in the various opportunities for public input. There will be many once this gets rolling in July.
Councilmember Bannister.
I have 3 quick announcements. One, the next Sunday night council caucus will be on June 30th at 7 o'clock in this room, and everyone's invited. And second announcement, I want to give a congratulations to the Ann Arbor branch of the NAACP that hosted all of us again last Saturday for the 25th annual Juneteenth celebration. It was better than ever, and we had a great time, and I'd like to specifically mention William Hampton and Norma McQuisiton, 2 of the leaders from the Ann Arbor NAACP who helped organize all that for us. And then lastly, we have an update on the safety measures around the Northside STEAM School. And for the Barton-Traver intersection, staff has discussed the potential, will need to discuss the issues at Barton and Traver and potential improvements there with the Ann Arbor Public Schools before any modifications will be designed or implemented. So this, they are recommending, will happen through the Ann Arbor Public Schools Transportation Safety Committee, and staff will suggest this as an agenda topic for this committee. And that was about it, unless Mr. Lazarus has anything to add on to the safety measures around Northside STEAM School.
I do not. Thank you.
Councilmember Hayner.
Thank you. I'm unsure of the process. Do we have to, Councilwoman Grand or the mayor, do we have to do anything around this resolution since it's actually read on there, or was that enough?
That's sufficient, though.
Okay.
It's noted for public, and then noted for public and council, and then we'll be voting on it in full.
Okay, thank
next
you.
cycle.
I guess I just second what Councilwoman Grand said, that it was a fantastic outpouring of applications for that, and it was a real challenge to go through them and balance it and try and get folks that are, going to move this process forward. And I think we have, and I'm very hopeful that, it's going to be kind of an energized body, and we're going to do some good here for the, for the public.
Further communication from council? I'd like to request confirmation of the following appointments that were presented to City Council at the June 3rd, 2019 regular session. To the Economic Development Corporation Board, Janet McDermott. To the Energy Commission, Teresa Hatcher. To the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board, Josh Winston. May I have a motion, please? Moved by Councilmember Grand, seconded by Councilmember Lum. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? They are approved. I'd like to recommend the following nominations for your consideration at our next meeting. To the Energy Commission, Amber McCoy. To the City Planning Commission, Ellie Abrams and Sarah Hammerschmidt. To the Zoning Board of Appeals, Joe Malkoon and Megan Peters. We now come to, also too, please, you'll see for our meeting at our next, consideration at our next meeting, a resolution to appoint Robin Stevens to the Human Rights Commission. We have now before us the consent agenda. May I have a motion, please, to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Ramlawi. Discussion of the consent agenda. Councilmember Lum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to pull CA 18, CA 19, and CA 20.
See 18, 19, 20 for Councilmember Bannister.
I'd like to pull CA 16.
CA 16. Further discussion of the consent agenda. Councilmember Hayner.
I'd like to discuss 34, please.
To pull it or just?
Yes,
to say-
pull it.
To pull it. 34. Further discussion.
Does need it be pulled to discuss?
No, you can say whatever you like on it. You may speak on it unless you want to vote.
No, I just wanted to comment on it, so I'll wait until.
Fair enough. That's your pleasure. Further discussion? All in favor of the consent agenda accepting CA 18, 19, 20, 16, and 34? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The consent agenda, with the exception of CA 18, 19, 20, 16, and 34, is approved with 11 council members present, thus satisfying the 8-vote requirement with respect to CA 7, CA 8, CA 9, CA 12, CA 30, CA 32, CA 36. CA 18, resolution to proceed with a road reconfiguration and safety enhancement project for Earhart Road from US 23 to South Waldenwood Drive and appropriate $34,500 and $40,500 respectively from the General Fund and Alternative Transportation Fund balances. Moved by Councilmember Lum, seconded by Councilmember Griswold. Discussion, please, of CA 18. Councilmember Lum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know what the outcome will be on this proposal for a road diet on Earhart Road will be, but I, for one, will not be supporting it. But I am very grateful that council passed the resolution in April requiring that road diet proposals must be approved by council. These road diet decisions are important decisions to the impacted neighbors, and that's certainly the case with Earhart, so it's appropriate, certainly we're having this discussion. I have to say, though, that what makes the discussions difficult and actually frustrating is that there is never any, never has been any follow-up analysis after a road diet. Ask questions, has the road diet actually improved safety as promised? Response, we don't know. Has the road diet increased traffic congestion and delays? Response, we don't know. Has the road diet simply resulted in diverting traffic to other neighborhood streets, making them more congested and safe? We don't know. I ask these questions every time, and the answers are always the same. We don't know. I also consistently ask if we have any actual or projected data on how many cyclists use or will use a road, and the answer there is also always, we don't know. Isn't that data that we should have before making substantial investments? I certainly think it is. And I'm sorry, but I'm not inclined to support any road diets or any road reconfigurations until we have the follow-up data and analysis on the road diets we've done so far and some sense of the volume of non-motorized users. I really don't think that's too much to ask. The proposal for Earhart is to convert 4 vehicle travel lanes to 2 and install roundabouts at Earhart and Glacier Way and at Earhart and Waldenwood. The analysis provided by the city indicated that a characteristic discouraging a road diet here is that the Earhart and Glacier Way intersection level of service will deteriorate to an E or F. It's not great now, the level of service is a D, but this will make it worse. In the past, the city's practice was to never take an action that would result in level of service of E or F, but that's what this would do. Beyond deteriorating the level of service at this intersection, when you listen to neighbors and read the survey verbatims, what strikes you is how many folks question both the need and the proposed solution in relation to the need. Many folks believe the road works okay for all users now. They believe the improvements necessary and more likely to improve safety are lighting, signage, pavement markings, and resurfacing the road, not the dramatic changes proposed here. Neighbors question whether 2 roundabouts so close to each other are even necessary, given the overall volume of traffic, and more importantly, whether their installation would in fact improve safety for all the users. In terms of the public feedback, it's unfortunate that none of the feedback is reflected in the cover memo for any of these road diet proposals. The cover memos do articulate the benefits, but not the users' concerns. As one resident mentioned to me and wrote to me, it's like they don't listen or don't care what we think. Regarding safety, there have not been a lot of accidents here, about 4 a year over the last 5 years. I certainly agree that any accident is a concern, but I also think it's reasonable for residents to question whether the proposed changes, lane reductions, and 2 roundabouts will actually reduce that number or increase it, and whether the roundabouts actually improve safety for pedestrians and cyclists. I've received feedback from Glacier Hills, and I appreciate that the spokesperson from Glacier Hills was here tonight to pass along their concerns. And our Glacier Hills residents have indicated, shared with both Councilmember Griswold and myself, that they believe installing a roundabout will make crossing Earhart as a pedestrian more difficult and less safe. I know staff and supporters will say that this is just a temporary test, if you will. It's not necessarily permanent. And to that, I would just say, honestly, what do you truly think the chances are when it comes time to resurface Earhart that will reverse this decision? I'd say slim to none. We've heard this before. It's never happened that it's been reversed. The city says it will conduct follow-up analysis after the test, but given our history and lack of any follow-up on all the road diets done so far, I'm quite skeptical that there will be robust data with which to perform any sort of detailed, objective follow-up analysis. So I believe that supporting this so-called test tonight effectively does make this a permanent decision, and I won't support that. I agree with many of the neighbors who believe that the solution, these dramatic changes, are disproportional to the problem. Some people have written that it's a solution in search of a problem, in fact. And while the changes may or may not improve safety, that they will make Earhart and Glacier Way a less efficient intersection. So for all these reasons, I will not be supporting this tonight, and I hope you will not either. And thank you all for listening.
Further discussion? Councilmember Griswold. Yeah, Councilmember Griswold, sorry, my apologies.
Okay, no, that's fine. Safety must be our absolute first priority in everything that we do. That said, we also have to honor our constituents. We had a very robust public engagement process that included 4 meetings. One of them, I think it was just me and the Glacier Hills neighbors, but So we asked people what they thought. We asked them to give up some of their time to tell us. We also had an online survey and a paper survey. And there's a lot of information there, and that was not given to the Transportation Commission before they voted on this, and I'm a member of the Transportation Commission, and that's because we extended our public comment period, which meant there were even more people who wanted to comment on this. So it's a very complex subject, and I believe that we need to honor our constituents and therefore refer this back to the Transportation Commission so that they can thoroughly evaluate all of the public comments, and in addition, consider that the Nixon Road, which is another road that runs north and south, as Earhart does, will be under construction in a few years, and traffic will have to be detoured on the other streets that are part of the reconstruction projects. Also, in terms of priorities, I think we need to look at what is going to give us the greatest safety for the effort and dollars expended. And we hear about streetlights, we hear about better uniform crosswalk markings, and another thing that we heard about was trimming the vegetation. Right now, we have a complaint-based system for vegetation, which means the vegetation gets overgrown about now, mid-June. You turn in a complaint, and then usually by mid-July, it gets trimmed. We really need a more aggressive system where we maintain the vegetation. And in most cases, it's not an additional cost to the city because it's on private property. And I drove down today, and the bike path, multi-use path, is definitely overgrown and needs to be trimmed, because the last thing we want to do is have a multi-use path that can't be used, and we're forcing pedestrians and cyclists into the street. So in conclusion, I move that we refer this back to the Transportation Commission. Oh, and they will be meeting on Wednesday of this week, so it would be a very short delay, and the city administrator has assured me that this would not delay the project.
Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Bannister. Discussion of the motion to refer the matter back to Planning Commission. Pardon me, Transportation Commission, thank you. Shortly, perhaps. Councilmember Long.
I'm frankly torn about this, and I think I've expressed this with several of you. I've also responded to all on some of the emails to let you know. You clearly know, I find it absolutely unacceptable that this recommendation was presented to the Transportation Commission, and none of the survey data, the feedback from the community meetings accompanied that recommendation. I don't know why we waste people's time and ask them their opinions if it's not going to be a critical piece of our decision-making and influence our decision-making. By our, I mean council and staff, obviously. And so, right, this didn't happen at the Transportation Commission, but, you know, surely folks had to be aware that, you know, we had jumped through all these hoops, gathered all this information. So there are process issues. But as you heard me with my, you know, plea, that I think this one on its merits does not stand. I mean, I really don't know if it's worth the trip to send it back to the Transportation Commission, because for all the points that I noted, I really just think if we can just discuss the merits and talk about that first, the merits of this proposal. But if there's not support for that, then obviously the next best thing is to send it back to the Transportation Commission. I mean, it should have been done right the first time around, but obviously it wasn't. And I actually got some emails from some folks saying, you know, yeah, the cover memo, the resolution, none of it reflects the feedback, and how disappointing is that? I mean, we have folders of emails from people and, you know, things that you didn't see that weren't actually included in the online survey. But obviously, that was very lengthy, over 300 pages, and I don't know who all had the time to go through all that. Councilmember Griswold and I did, and people, had a lot to say about this, and that should certainly matter.
Further discussion on the motion, Councilmember Nelson.
I'd like to support a postponement, mostly so that the feedback can be considered, but I'm hopeful that there'll actually be more feedback, because somebody emailed council, and you responded, Councilmember Lum, and replied also that we could benefit from it, and that back and forth was really interesting to me, and I'm really interested in understanding more detail about this, and hopefully having our Transportation Commission consider more of the other ideas and alternatives that were presented to us by public comment from the woman from Glacier Hills. And at any rate, if we are reassured that it's not going to delay the project, and the timeline is short enough for us to do that, I would support a postponement. Thank you.
Referral back. No worries.
Yes, whatever it's called.
Whatever we're talking
Referral
about.
back, whatever we call it. Yes, thank you.
Fair enough, my apologies. Further discussion of the motion to refer back to Transportation, Councilmember Ramalawi, and perhaps.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, this one definitely has some issues to it. I think Councilmember Lum is correct. At least I agree with her on the merits. One that really sticks out to me is, I don't know if staff is here to answer. I'm not sure if this is the proper time on this motion to ask staff about it. But I do favor postponement, because I need to get more information. Obviously, the Transportation Commission needs more information, and but it does have some questionable merits as well.
Perhaps if this is going with people who have questions about this substantively, if it's going back to Transportation, perhaps you can have those questions offline.
It's a question about how it goes back.
Councilmember Hayner.
So if this gets sent back, then do we send it back with some kind of description of what we want them to look at specifically, or is it just sort of generally referred to what Kathy had suggested?
I think the motion
Councilwoman
was made in the context of asking Transportation Commission to take into account the public comment, which had not been completed by the time they voted.
And then what will come back is a modified recommendation, a recommendation, whatever?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that consistent, Councilmember Griswold? Further discussion of the motion to send on back to Transportation. Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Ramalawi.
Councilmember Ramalawi?
Yes.
Councilmember Hayner?
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister?
Yes.
Councilmember Griswold?
Yes.
Councilmember Lum?
Yes?
Councilmember Grand?
Yes.
Councilmember Eckerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
No.
Motion carries.
CA 19, resolution to proceed with the road configuration from Traverwood Drive, for Traverwood Drive from Huron Parkway to Plymouth Road. Moved by Councilmember Lum, seconded by Councilmember Hayner. Discussion, please, of CA 19.
Do you want to go first?
Oh, okay, well, I'll be brief.
Councilmember Hayner.
Thank you. Yeah, so I attended along with Councilwoman Lum and Griswold, I believe, attended the public meeting on this. And what I heard from the avid cyclist was something that I lived when, in my more frequent cycling time, I still am a cyclist, but not like I used to, and which was everywhere always, is they expressed concerns about the doors, about getting doored. And every cyclist knows what that is, where you're craning your neck this way to look and see if you can see a head in that seat about to open a door. And I thought that was a really curious observation, because I had kind of, I don't forget about that, because I think the same thing when I'm riding my bike now, but, so their question was, what was the problem we were trying to be solved by laying all that parking out there? And I thought that was a pretty legit question. And we had some folks write us, and they expressed their concerns about the grade from the library parking out to the street might be improved, was pretty poor now, and might be improved if that parking is moved out. So my question was, because we've seen this on other parts of the little stub of Traver that runs between Huron Parkway and Nixon, where we've road dieted, and that's okay, but we've put in this parking, and that parking's always full there. So I know there's a need for this parking in these areas, and I'm just wondering, is this road diet for its own purpose? Is the parking for the library's purpose? Is the increased street parking for Google's benefit? Like, what is this sort of, everybody wins on this, or, I mean, I just wondered what the thinking was with engineering when we do this, especially the part of shifting the library parking out. That doesn't make sense to me. I mean, why not add a corner where you have difficulty? Why not? I guess I just don't understand all the geometries that are in play here. And it was actually to the prior one, which we just sent back to transportation, if I would put a note on sending it back, I would say, tell me how this test roundabout's gonna work. Because it's just gonna be paint stripes is what I'm seeing. So I'm interested in that. See, that was CA night, or, the prior.
20.
That was, what was that one?
It'll be 20.
Oh, well. Anyway, so I know those were kind of, there was a little train of thought there, but what's the problem we're trying to solve here? Is it just a safety issue?
Mr. Hess?
Brayden Hess, city staff. So we had gotten some requests from both the Michigan Islamic Center as well as the Ann Arbor District Library to look at possibilities for on-street parking over there. And then the more we looked into it too, we thought it also provided a sort of de facto park and ride type function as well, that you know, instead of cars parking in the neighborhood, they could park on this section, Traverwood, and then catch the bus into downtown. And so you're right, this is kind of a compromise solution, right? We were taking in several different inputs. We're trying to, you know, improve the condition for cyclists. We're trying to improve the condition for pedestrians, and then also see if we could accommodate this request for on-street parking. So, you know, this is the solution that we came up with. You're right, when we heard from cyclists, a lot of the cyclists didn't like the Traverwood option because it's a share-o or share the road condition in one direction, where it's a buffered bike lane in the other direction. And, you know, other motorists didn't like the loss of the lane either. So this is kind of, you know, trying to find a compromise solution, which, you know, oftentimes doesn't make everyone happy, but it's kind of what we thought we could get the most out of that segment of corridor and try to achieve as many things as possible with what was proposed.
Yeah, I mean, sorry.
And I'm sorry, if I may as well, just to answer your other question, there are delineators proposed as part of the Earhart project, so it's more than just paint. There's a vertical element, so there are those little
Like
plastic.
little bollards?
Yeah, yeah, so that's what would help kind of keep people true to what would be configured as part of that.
I'll just put out there that a gentleman who I ran into who runs he does lawn maintenance and types, things like that out there on their facilities, and he was chuckling over the Benny Hill-like situation that's gonna occur in front of on this roundabout with his big trailers, and they didn't know how they were gonna make it through, and there was some kind of odd concerns about this roundabout idea there, and having been through that intersection many times, I'm trying to picture it myself. I get them, but I know not everybody does. So there can be signage that says, hey, do this, like roundabout signage.
Just don't do it.
Well, I should have spoken to this earlier. I apologize, but, yeah, I know.
Right, so, yeah, my understanding is we would, you know, accompany there is typical roundabout signage. Whenever you approach a roundabout, you see that in other places around town, Nixon and south on State Street, so.
Same kind of thing, but just no physical construction. So, back to Traverwood, and with my apologies. The idea that we're taking out the library indent, or whatever that's called, that parking, did we put that in for them, or is that a library property? Does anybody know?
Fortunately, that predates my time. It's in the
Okay.
public right-of-way, so I suspect that it's probably something that the city did. I couldn't tell you when.
Sort of in cooperation with the new construction?
Yeah, it looks like it.
I think it was done when the library was built
Yeah, it was. So
By the
there was some sort of cooperative effort then in
by
that
the
case?
library.
I would imagine so.
Okay, I just wasn't sure. I just wondered if we were, incurring any additional expenses for doing work that maybe the library should be doing.
Councilmember, just to get back to your point, getting doored is not a function of not having pavement markings. Pavement markings increase the awareness that cyclists are there and actually make people more aware that they have to share the roads. The likelihood of getting doored is less, just as a matter.
You think it's less when we add parking all along a street than when the parking wasn't there before, you mean? No, certainly you can't mean that.
No, I think you know, we're trying to optimize the use of the public right-of-way and the real estate that exists there, and when you put a pavement marking down that increases people's awareness that there are cyclists there, it can only help.
Councilor Griswold.
Defer to Councilmember Nelson. She had her
Councilmember
hand up
Nelson.
first, I think.
Thank you. I just had a question about the parking that's created on that street. How, if you're saying that our hope is that it might actually become kind of a park and ride, a likely place for somebody to park and use the bus system, how many spots are we creating by, how many cars could potentially park there? I'm looking through my packet and I'm not finding that number. Do we know?
It's at least,
I don't have a count readily available. We can find out and follow up with you on that. I guess where we've seen this happen before is on North Huron Parkway, where we have a similar situation where we see people during the daytime will kind of use the on-street parking, the parallel parking up there. And so it was kind of with an eye towards that and kind of creating a sort of similar situation.
Okay. Because it's compelling to me if we're creating, like how many spots we're creating versus the potential hazard of, that Councilmember Hayner talked about. That matters to me. Thank you.
Councilor Griswold.
The same thing applies as CA 18 in terms of the public engagement was not considered by the Transportation Commission, so I would recommend that we refer this back to the Transportation Commission for them to consider the public engagement process as well as the construction that's planned on Nixon Road.
Second.
I would second.
Second by Councilmember Eden.
I
Mr.
just
Lazarus.
asked Mr. Hess to talk about the dynamics of what happened at the Transportation Commission meeting, because I'm concerned there's a image being crafted that staff's been not considerate of the input we've gotten.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking to the Transportation Commission for well over a year on these. So, you know, just to go back in history, the reason why these are being evaluated in the first place is these are specifically identified in the non-motorized plan. It was something that was brought to our attention that, you know, this is something that we should look into a little bit more. And so we had promised that we were going to look at the data, and then we reported that data in February in terms of what those initial findings were. I will say, you know, I think there's well, I will say that not all road diets have advanced, because there were some that didn't look like they would work from a traffic standpoint and how much volume is needed to be carried. So Platte Road, for example, we looked at the data. We didn't think that a road diet could both serve the needs of the motorists as well as some of the other needs along that corridor. So the ones that we brought forward and advanced through public engagement were ones that, from a technical standpoint, looked like they could accomplish both the safety benefits that are proposed as well as the multimodal benefits that are proposed. We had discussions with Transportation Commission in February. They received the data and the analysis positively. And when we went back to them last month, it was to show them the resolution that we were going to bring forward to council. No objections were raised at that meeting as to whether or not they didn't have the benefit of the public comment. They were aware that it was still ongoing for Traver Wood and Green, and it still moved forward. And so that is why, you know, our goal pursuant to the resolution passed by council is to provide council with the full packet of information. And so that was our, you know, goal to make sure that the public comment was complete by then and presented to you in that fashion.
Thank you.
Further discussion of the Councilor Lum.
So from this, I would hope that there's a lesson learned, that when a recommendation is presented to the Transportation Commission, a recommendation that's accompanied by community outreach and engagement, online surveys, community meetings, that it's premature to take a recommendation to the Transportation Commission when we're not positioned to present that or prepared or just I don't know, not interested, don't think it's valuable to present that information to the transportation commissioners. And if we have transportation commissioners who knew that we were gathering this information, I would have hoped that, they would have hit pause and said, this is not ready for prime time. We want this feedback, this community feedback, to inform our recommendation. And at the very least, there should have been some, mention of that in some of the staff memos, and there wasn't. So it's not good process. On this proposal for Traver, I'll support the postponement, but there wasn't much feedback on this one. There were just 20 to 25 survey responses, so nothing compared to Earhart and Green. And the city did try with a couple of meetings and outreach efforts. I don't know if the lack of engagement by the neighbors there indicates a lack of strong feelings on the matter or not, but I do wonder if it's worth it to make one more attempt at getting some feedback before moving forward on this. And it is worth noting, though, that of the limited feedback, it was pretty mixed for and against the proposal. So, on this one, I have strong feelings either way on this one, but we'll support a postponement.
Further discussion? Councilmember Griswold.
Yeah, it wasn't my intent to place blame. I agree with Councilmember Lum that the process just wasn't good, and we're all extremely busy, and we have citizen volunteers on the Transportation Commission that we expect to do sort of a deeper analysis than what we're able to do because of the length of our agenda, and I think we need to take advantage of them and then honor our constituents. One other comment I wanted to make is we make reference to the non-motorized plan, but the non-motorized plan is really out of date, and we have acknowledged that by a $400,000 expenditure for a new plan. So while it was in the non-motorized transportation plan from 2007/2013, many things have changed in this area of Ann Arbor since then, and so I think that we need to carefully look at these recommendations based on traffic movement at this time.
Second time on the postponement?
Is there any real, if you feel the need, I think we're rolling to.
Okay, I just want a quick follow-on to what Councilmember Griswold just said vis-à-vis the 2013 non-motorized plan. And, yeah, it's outdated, and so we're bringing forward recommendations that don't reflect the realities out there. In the Green Road area, the strip mall next to Green Road, where we have the CVS and Plum Market, we're going to be seeing a site plan proposal there to put up a larger hotel there. And obviously, as you all know, we've approved the development of we're adding about 1,000+ new units in and around that area. The U of M North Campus Research Complex is growing by leaps and bounds, and I challenge anyone to just travel out that way any time of the day, particularly during morning and PM rush, and you'll get a taste for what it's like in that area. 2 weeks ago, I was there at 8 a.m. at Plymouth and Green, and there were two young men sitting catty-corner from each other, counting cars. So thank you, City of Ann Arbor, for putting them out there. Rolled down my window, I called out to one young fellow, and I said, "Can I ask you what you're doing?" He held up his gizmo and said, "We're counting cars," and they were clicking, counting the number of cars making turns in all the manners that they can turn and maneuver through that intersection. And then I just shared that I was hearing from a lot of folks that when we added that turn lane, that right turn lane on Green Road going south onto Plymouth, when we completed the water main project there, that I'm Councilmember Griswold as well, hearing from so many people that has really helped them, and I'm glad we took out that lane reduction there. And I then just ended by saying the traffic here is insane. As cars were, trucks, you name it, were zipping every which way, and the young man responded, shouted, because we were shouting at each other, "I agree." That was a poster child moment for me, so I support the postponement.
Further discussion of the referral back to transportation? Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Romalawi.
Councilmember Romali,
Yes.
Councilmember Hayner,
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister,
Yes.
Councilmember Griswold,
Yes.
Councilmember Lum,
Yes.
Councilmember Grand,
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton,
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
No.
Motion carries.
CA 20, resolution to proceed with the road reconfiguration for Green Road from Burbank Drive to Plymouth Road. Moved by Councilmember Lum, seconded by Councilmember Hayner. Discussion, please, of CA 20, and perhaps if this is going to go back, it can just go back first. Councilmember
That would be my motion.
Councilmember Romalawi to go back to Transportation Commission for the purpose previous?
Yes.
Thank you. Second by Councilmember Eaton. Further discussion? Councilmember Grant.
Just very briefly, I do want to thank the staff that worked so hard on these plans and are trying to put forward our, non-motorized plan. And I hope that in sending this back to Transportation Commission, that we do value the input and expertise from staff, at least as much as we value the input of those who are not experts in this area, and that if it does come back to Transportation Commission, they are able to evaluate all these data points and still recommend that these go forward, that we then take that recommendation seriously. And I'm sending this back in good faith, that we will listen to that recommendation and follow suit, no matter, if it's positive or negative.
Councilmember Lum.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll support the postponement, obviously, but I want everyone to be aware, because there were pages and pages and pages of feedback on this one, that the public feedback on this proposal was not positive. Of the roughly 40 respondents to the May 9th open house survey, 57% did not support or had low support for the lane reduction proposal generally, and 72% of the respondents did not support or had low support for the plan to reduce green to one-lane northbound starting immediately at Plymouth. The relatively strong opposition was not mentioned in the cover memo and didn't impact the recommendation either. Obviously, I think that's very unfortunate. So my takeaway from all this is it's hard to conclude anything other than that the city's quite determined to implement these road diets wherever possible, despite the traffic challenges, which are very significant in this area, and public opposition. Thanks.
Further discussion? Councilmember Hayner.
Yeah, I had specific concerns about all these projects, but I support the idea generally, and also our staff for the creative work they're doing in trying to implement our non-motorized transportation plan, although it may be 6 to 10 years out of date. But I won't make the promise that I'm going to support this just because it comes back with Transportation Commission's rubber stamp approval. I just can't, because I have legitimate concerns, as have constituents. And I'm not afraid of getting doored myself, because I'll take the lane. I'll Ken Clark it out there and take the lane. But I just, there are concerns. So I won't. I'm sorry to Councilwoman Graham, but I won't make that promise. But I'll happily send it back to them.
Further discussion? Roll call vote, please, on referral back to Transportation Commission, please, starting with Councilmember Romalawi.
Councilmember Romali,
Yes.
Councilmember Hayner,
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister,
Yes.
Councilmember Griswold,
Yes.
Councilmember Lum,
Yes.
Councilmember Grand,
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton,
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
No.
Motion carries.
CA 16, resolution number 3, establishing a public hearing for the single lot special assessment 1425 Pontiac Trail, moved by Councilmember Bannister, second by Councilmember Hayner. Discussion, please, of CA 16.
Well,
I forget who pulled this, Councilmember Bannister.
yes.
Sorry, my apologies.
Well, this is another interesting case of the non-motorized plan being 6 to 10 years out of date. This particular single lot special assessment for a sidewalk got triggered as part of a $4.5 million water main project. And I submitted and it turns out that it is located at our infamous Guy Beckley historic home built in 1842 that is on the National Parks Registry as being famous for Guy Beckley's work as an abolitionist. And so last Thursday, when we got the agenda questions back for tonight's meeting, and I realized in the answers and responses that the homeowner had not been fully, properly maybe informed how to protest this sidewalk. I reached out to him and Friday night, and he immediately emailed back and called. And so we've swung into action about the preserving and protecting the natural and historic nature of this property. Many of you may have visited this property. The African American Cultural History Museum is across the street, and that's when I visited the property, is on tours from them. We come over, stand in the yard, and experience the whole history of this area. The owners it's been in their family for 23 years from one brother and sister, and then just in May, they've sold it to another brother and sister-in-law. So they are trying to be good stewards of this nationally significant historic property that we are fortunate to have here in Ann Arbor. And they are concerned that laying down a concrete sidewalk, when we do have a sidewalk on the other side of the street, is going to have a negative impact on the experience that we all have when we enter the property. So we have swung into action. Just today, there's been some more emails amongst various historic activists in town, several from about half a dozen people from the Old Fourth Ward are looking into weigh in on their opinion on this. The homeowner has talked to his immediate neighbors and whether they felt a sidewalk was needed, and they oppose adding the sidewalk at this time. Because again, we do have a sidewalk on Argo. And just lastly, I wanted to confirm the email that the homeowner sent yesterday needs to be registered as an official appearance in person by letter with the city clerk. And I just wanted to, since she is out of town, I wanted to confirm if anyone knows if that email that he sent directed specifically for this purpose has been properly logged. Or should I forward it again? That would be no problem. I think everything's okay. I just want to make sure nothing's gone wrong with the detail.
Mr. Hupy?
To answer the last question first and then go back to a first statement. This resolution just sets the public hearing. The concern against the project or for the project should be registered at the public hearing. So this is not the appropriate time, but it can be entered with the clerk at the appropriate time. Second of all, the staff has communicated with the previous owner about the special assessment, and as soon as we found out who the new owner was, we communicated with that person. Staff was diligent about explaining the process and the methods and means of communicating about the special assessment and the impacts on the property and the property owner. So to say that staff did not communicate with them is incorrect.
Well, I respect your opinion on that. I do know that I have spent now hours on the phone with the homeowner explaining the process and what's happening in.
I'm not arguing that you have or haven't spent time with them. I suspect you have spent much time with them. But we have documented communications with the property owner.
Okay, well, those, I did ask for those in my agenda questions, and I guess the answer was staff did not have time to determine if there was
That answer came from the assessor's office. The communications has gone through the engineering staff, so we can gladly provide you that communication.
Great. Okay. Okay, well, I think, I appreciate you saying that, yeah, that this is just setting the public hearing. I think, though, as we all know, if we so choose, we can cancel this this sidewalk at this time also, and save our time at the following meeting and just not do a public hearing on it, is also another option.
I can't comment on that. That's a city code process question that I would expect the attorney's office to comment if they have any.
Well, just in closing, I would say that one of the points brought up by the homeowner was that we would, it brings up the question again, that when we are spending tax dollars on sidewalks for safety purposes, that this one, I do not believe this one is a critical need or a priority. By simply walking in the area, I think maybe a crosswalk coming from Chandler and Argo over to Beckley Park would be the more high-risk area for pedestrians in the area, rather than being able to walk along a concrete sidewalk on the Beckley House property itself. Again, I'm just mainly concerned about the preserving and protecting the historic and natural effect of this nationally significant property. Thank you.
Councilmember Hayner.
Mr. Hoopy, may I ask you a question? I believe that striping is going to be part of that restriping of that area when this resurfacing is completed, is it not? A crosswalk there?
I'm looking at staff for the answers.
It's been a while since I looked at the revised plans, but.
Chandler and Argo?
Yeah, Chandler to the Beckley Park, or the Beckley Park
Yeah,
Trail.
there'll be a striped crosswalk there.
Okay,
correct.
that's what I thought I saw in the plans. So that's already happened, which is a good thing. And for those of you who don't know the area, this sidewalk is from Pontiac Trail to the park entrance, essentially. And so the question I wanted to ask you, Mr. Hoopy, was, we're looking for public, it is a public safety issue here, and I used to live 2 houses down from there. We grew up with our little toddlers and cats and everything in that park. So, there's a concern that it is sort of an access sidewalk to that park. It doesn't go beyond that. We have no plans to go beyond that and down the river on that side of Longshore, because that's Fairview Cemetery, which is city property, so we're kind of sticking it on this homeowner. But my question is, can we do some kind of alternative sidewalk or path? Can we do a proper base and a crushed granite or something that's more in keeping with the historic character of that area, since we do have a sidewalk on the other side of the street?
It's in the right of way, and if we are creating a pathway, it has to be ADA accessible.
So we're talking about asphalt or concrete?
A hard surface.
A hard surface.
And we are building the sidewalk along a portion of the park property, too.
Right, that stub that goes to the trail. Would a cobble like Carytown be sufficient? Would a brick surface work? Pavers?
So expensive.
That's a hard surface. Permeable pavers.
Certain brick surfaces would be acceptable, similar to the brick surfaces that you would see in the downtown, like on Washington Street.
Right.
That have tight joints, but you can't have something that's spaced out more, that would create places for wheelchair wheels to get stuck.
Is the City Hall parking lot, the permeable surface out there, is that considered ADA compliant?
I do not know.
I'm just curious. just looking for alternatives for this homeowner that can kind of, resolve the two ends of this issue. So that's why I asked, so, I mean, I'm always happy to support a public hearing, as I've mentioned in the past, so I'll vote this forward, but I think there's gonna be, some resistance to this, so I'm looking for a better solution that is amenable to all parties.
Councilor Grant.
Thank you. I looked up what the historic district guidelines are for sidewalks, because I was skeptical when I heard this argument, because I grew up in New England and went to high school with buildings that were in the 16 and 1700s that line the street. And there were sidewalks in front of all of those buildings. That's how people walked to them and saw them, because it was basically a living museum. So I was skeptical that sidewalks would not be in line with historic district, because I think, sidewalks go way back a long time, and we know they need to be accessible. So I looked up the state guidelines for historic district, and it says that, oh, and I just missed it. Where did I have it? I apologize. Okay, so it says plain concrete sidewalks are strongly encouraged unless historic photographs document another material was used. So I guess they originally were dirt and wood, but that was a long time ago. And it said that concrete sidewalks almost always replace wood and dirt paths. So unless there's documentation that we saw brick or stone, which I think we heard would not be compliant, would be a lot more expensive than concrete, I'm assuming concrete would be the way to go and consistent with our state historic guidelines, and well, certainly anecdotal, consistent with my experience with buildings that are much older than this one.
And if I can comment, it would match the concrete sidewalk in front of the home.
Yeah, thank you.
Further discussion of CA 16? Roll call, Councilmember Hayner.
Well, I would only mention that, and we've had this happen before here, where we're not going from a historic path or planks to a sidewalk, which is, it would be concrete replacement. We're going from nothing to a sidewalk. Just like last week, we weren't going from 0 to 160 units, we were going from 120 to 160 at the Bright Dawn project. So we gotta remember where we're starting and where we're going when we talk about these things.
Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Alawi.
Councilmember Remlali?
Yes.
Councilmember Hayner?
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister?
No.
Councilmember Griswold?
Yes.
Councilmember Lum?
Yes.
Councilmember Grant?
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton?
No.
Councilmember Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Motion carries.
CA 34, resolution to approve a contract with Ann Arbor Spark for economic development services in the amount of $75,000. Moved by Councilmember Hayner, seconded by Councilmember Ackerman. Discussion, please, of CA 34. Councilmember Hayner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, for years, I've wondered about this $75,000, because we make this small investment with many larger investments in this group, in Spark. And then we're asked to take the results and the returns and the benefits of that investment, and, we actually aren't asked to take them. We don't get any money back from this. We're asked to take it in the form of economic development activity and jobs retained and sort of somewhat intangible gains, you might say, for this public investment. And so, while 75 grand isn't that much, I just wanted to throw that out there, that we do this every year, and at some point, I'm interested in two things. One is seeing more of an actual cash return on our investments. And secondly, continuing to encourage Spark to diversify in the types of businesses that they invest in. Because nobody wants to be a one-trick pony. And they make IT investments almost solely. And as we're starting to see, and it came up at Energy Commission last week, that IT is a big energy hog, and there's a lot of CO2 going when they're running these server farms, and they're doing especially when it comes to AI and machine learning and these kinds of cutting-edge type things that Sparkers want to invest in. And so it's just, I'd like to see them diversify their types of investments. I know they claim success with this, in this kind of narrow field, but, I mean, we need light industry, we need, we need farming technology, and they've done some of that, but it's all software side. And so I'm gonna support this, but I just wanted to say a few things about it. I'm not thrilled with with their narrow focus. And I spoke with some of those folks, and, you know, they seem to think that that was a good idea, that they should diversify a little bit, but I'm not sure where that went. So, you know, I look forward to their annual report, and I look forward to kind of changing our relationship with them in the future, where we actually see some cash return for our money.
Further discussion? Councilor Ramlawi.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. As a board member for the LDFA, I feel confident in supporting this. I know in the years past, before sitting at this table, I was suspicious of this money and whether something like Spark needed our $50,000 or our $75,000. But being in on the conversations that I've been in on and will continue to go forward with, I think we're getting a pretty good deal. Hopefully I can stand by those words in 12 months' time to have a seat at the table and to foster an environment for growth. And I agree with you, we need diversity. In fact, I think that's why Spark was created to begin with for our region, to diversify our economy. And I think the message is getting to them that we would like to see it expand and help more types of businesses. And, you know, we'll have a meeting tomorrow morning I'll be at, and I'll sure to carry the message with me. But I definitely was one that was skeptical, and, you know, I always will be to a slight degree, but I feel comfortable in supporting this.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is, I'm sorry, my apologies. It is approved with 10 council members present, with 11 council members present, 10 voting in the affirmative, Councilmember Griswold voting in opposition. We now come to a set of public hearings. Public hearings are opportunities for members of the public to speak to council and the community about a specific item on the agenda. That is to say, the specific item that is the subject of the public hearing. To speak at a public hearing, you need not have signed up in advance, but your speech must relate to the specific item on the agenda that is the subject of the public hearing. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. And finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council, we'd be delighted to provide it to you. Public hearing number 1, an ordinance to amend sections 8513, 8516, 8517, 8519, 8525, 8528, and 8530 of Chapter 105 Housing Code of Title 8 of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Is there anyone who would like to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. Public hearing number 2, an ordinance to repeal Chapter 87, Recreation, Amusements, and Games of Title 7 of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Is there anyone who would like to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, this public hearing is closed. We have before us the work session minutes of May 17 and the regular session meeting minutes of June 3rd, 2019. May I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes? Moved by Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Ramlawi. Discussion, please, of the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? They are approved. B1, an ordinance to amend sections 8513, 8516, 8517, 8519, 8525, 8528, and 8530 of Chapter 105 Housing Code of Title 8 of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Moved by Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Hayner. Discussion, please, of B1. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved. B2, an ordinance to repeal, an ordinance to appeal Chapter 87, Recreation, Amusements, and Games of Title 7 of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor. Moved by Councilmember Grand, seconded by Councilmember Hayner. Discussion, please, of B2. Councilmember Hayner.
I don't know if Mr. Delacorte's still here. I saw him over there earlier. Is he still here?
He'd never
No.
leave us.
Well, he might have. That's all right. I just had a question, because I know this concerns dance halls, and, you know, in Detroit had this situation where they were kind of manipulating, how can I put it delicately? They were allowing dance halls for folks that they wanted to have them and not allowing them for folks they didn't. And I just wondered if there was any concerns at all that, I mean, those are just all antiquated laws we're wiping from the books, right? Did anybody else on this body have any concerns about this whatsoever? No, I know some of you are into this legalese. No? Okay, thanks.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It's approved. C1, an ordinance to amend Chapter 11, Risk Fund of Title I of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor, moved by Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Lum. Discussion, please, of C1. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? It's approved. C2, an ordinance to amend Section 1292 of Chapter 13, Special Assessments of Title I of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor, moved by Councilmember Lum, seconded by Councilmember Smith. Discussion, please, of C2. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved. C3, an ordinance to amend Sections 1311, 1316, 1317, 1319, and 1324 in Chapter 14, Purchasing, Contracting, and Selling Procedure, Title I of the Code of the City of Ann Arbor, moved by Councilmember Lum, seconded by Councilmember Ackerman. Discussion, please, of C3. Councilmember Lum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Every once in a while, we get an item that appears innocuous on the surface that's much more important and raises significant policy considerations. And that is what we have here. It's a proposal to revise the city's ordinance governing purchasing procedures. And while a couple of the proposed changes are administrative and not consequential, one of the changes is quite important. At the end of my comments, I'll be moving to strike that particular change and retain the others, but first let me explain my rationale and provide a bit of context. Like most organizations, public and private, the cornerstone of the city's purchasing procedures ordinance is competitive bidding. It's certainly appropriate, as competitive bidding is a core element of financial efficiency and discipline. The ordinance is quite prescriptive and quite specific on how the competitive bidding should be done, and the few instances when the competitive bidding requirement can be waived. And that, too, is wholly appropriate. The proposed change to Section 1:316 is significant. This is the section outlining when the competitive bidding requirement can be waived. The proposal here is to allow the city administrator to waive the competitive bidding requirement when he or she determines that competitive bidding, quote, isn't practical or of value to the city, end quote. The existing ordinance doesn't allow waiving the competitive bidding requirement unless it's agreed to by city council and the city administrator. That's an important control and safeguard for taxpayers. Granting the authority to the administrator to waive the competitive bidding requirement on such broad terms isn't appropriate, in my view, or consistent with council's fiduciary responsibility to taxpayers. I raised these concerns, and staff's response was essentially that since council approves all the purchases in excess of $25,000, council can reject a purchase and specify competitive bidding if council wants. So the change is no big deal. That is not adequate rationale for a couple of reasons. One, council should not have to be the policeman in ensuring proper financial discipline. Competitive bidding should be standard operating procedure, the expectation and embedded in our culture. And two, the argument does not apply to purchases under $25,000, and there are quite a few of those, roughly 200 a year, which translates to $4 million at an average of $20,000. Anyway, I believe council should resist any proposed change that either compromises the competitive bidding expectation or sends a message to the organization that not competitive bidding is okay. And this does both. I do know staff are busy, and I know it's more work, and it takes time to get 3 bids or conduct an RFP process. But that's always been the case, and it should remain. It should remain the standard, and it should remain the expectation. Apparently, the administrator has already delegated to the service area administrators the authority to waive competitive bidding requirements that the ordinance granted solely to him. That, too, is a step in the wrong direction, and this would be another. And why is this coming up now? It's because Recycle Ann Arbor has presented to the city an unsolicited proposal to operate the MRF, and to implement the proposal, the competitive bidding ordinance needs to be revised. I recognize that particular item is not before us tonight, but it likely will be sooner rather than later, so it's worth mentioning along with a word of caution. Before we decide to not bid services, and before we decide to accept an unsolicited bid from Recycle Ann Arbor, we need to revisit the history. In 1996, Recycle Ann Arbor also presented an unsolicited proposal. In that case, an alternative bid for recycling collection services. The city almost accepted that alternate bid. And if we had, it would have cost the city over $1 million in extra costs. It was quite the controversy at the time. I can send you, Ann Arbor News covered this for about a month or so. It was very controversial. Fortunately, however, the city figured out the scheme and rejected Recycle Ann Arbor's alternative and saved over $1 million. I asked staff to provide a list of the Recycle Ann Arbor contracts and amendments to contracts over the last 25 years to provide my younger colleagues a history lesson. Please review that spreadsheet. It's insightful in terms of the history of amending and increasing contracts with Recycle Ann Arbor, but it is not comprehensive. It doesn't accurately portray this 1996 fiasco. It wasn't simply an extension, but a competitive bidding process that blew up because of Recycle Ann Arbor. And it doesn't include a $500,000 bailout of Recycle Ann Arbor in 1992. I recognize the times have changed, and Recycle Ann Arbor is one of our longtime partners. I'm just providing a heads up on the potential pitfalls of not bidding services. So back to the matter at hand, this purchasing procedure ordinance revision. I move to strike the proposed revisions to Section 1:316, Paragraph 4, the section on exceptions to competitive bidding. In my view, the remaining changes are fine, and for the reasons I've articulated, I hope you'll support my amendment tonight. And I will just also add that if this Section 1:316 is not removed, I will not be supporting C3 at first reading tonight, or at second reading if it should be passed tonight. So I move to strike, again, the proposed revisions to Section 1:316, Paragraph 4.
Is there a second?
I second that.
Seconded by Councilmember Eaton. Discussion of the amendment. Councilmember Hayner.
I'll just say I fully support this amendment, and I thank Councilwoman Lum for her, once again, for her diligence in, tracking down what's happening. And I probably, if somebody wanted to go back and look at the historic record, you'd find me up there at the podium bellyaching about the no-bid contract that was going to RAA, because it just didn't make any sense to me at the time as a resident. And all the changes and all the overruns and all the woes that we had, including the bailout, that was a real problem. And yes, as you point out, times have changed, but that stands as an example and a cautionary tale for us here at this body, that there's a reason that we have to pour through this, and we have a qualified staff to do that for us also and assist us with this, because we can't give away our fiscal responsibility. It really falls to us. And so I appreciate your diligence, and I fully support this amendment.
Councilmember Ramlawi, then Mr. Lazarus wants to weigh in. Councilmember
Well,
Ramlawi.
I'll let our city administrator perhaps weigh in first.
Mr. Lazarus.
Thank you. Certainly understand the concerns that Councilmember Lum has raised. One item on C-1316, Paragraph 4, is I would ask that in addition to, if you revert back to the original language, that you add in services in addition to supplies or equipment, because many of the contracts that come up on where competitive bidding is not required by law, city charter for services, and many of the contracts that we consider are mixed, particularly in the areas like IT procurement, where they mix both services and supplies. So that's one thing that I would ask that you do consider.
Yes.
The second is the practical nature, that there are a lot of contracts that come by that are unique in nature, that are of small dollar value. Some of the repair parts for things like fire trucks are not competitively bid. There are probably some other areas that Mr. Crawford and Ms. Blake could add in as well. So, I mean, that's the basis. There's two reasons for really changing this subparagraph. One is to incorporate services. The other is to address the procurement of small items. Tom, do you have anything you want to add?
I think you covered most of it. I mean, just to clarify, all contracts over 25,000, whether the sole source or not, or competitively bid, they all come to council regardless, and so you have an opportunity on those. For the under $25,000, a portion of those are not sole source, are sole sourced. And as a percent of our total dollars that we spend a year, that's about 4%. I believe it's about 25% of the number of items we have. So what this does is it addresses the fact we have a high volume of low-dollar items, and the management team is trying to manage those efficiently. They don't send everything through sole source, but there are a lot of items, for example, like parts or software or something where we've got to follow on maintenance. I can find a list of several of them that we have, but that's what that's for. That's why the request is there.
Councilmember Romali.
Well, I think our administrator had helped with his statement there, but I also would like to thank Councilmember Lum for, being the hound she is and sniffs out everything. That it is important that things do come back to us and that we do have a competitive bidding process. And we can't leave things for a benevolent leader. We need to make sure that, these documents that we live by are ones that we need to live with in the best of times and the worst of times. So I just appreciate the work and the fact that the proposed changes will be amended so they're more permissible.
Further discussion? Mr. Crawford, do you have any extra thoughts on the subject?
If I may offer a solution that I don't know if you had a chance to see in the lengthy Q&As, one option you could consider, given the fact that this is a relatively small dollar item, is that staff provide you on a periodic basis all of the items that we do have sole source that are small, so that you're seeing everything that we're doing. That's something we could produce, either monthly or quarterly, and now that would be post-action, right? I mean, to have us bring everything to you would be, a lot more items on your agenda, or just to require bidding will slow things down a lot for our ability to deliver services and respond to requests that we have. So I just wanted to offer that as a suggestion. If you hadn't seen that in the Q&As, I'd be happy to do that as well.
Councilor Graham, then Lum.
Oh, Mr. Crawford, if you can just hang out right there, thank you. Can you give me an example of what you mean by small in terms of
Well,
dollar
under
amount?
25,000 is what I'm considering small.
Okay.
Councilor, please.
I have one point. Betsy Blake with the City Attorney's Office. If we do change it and go in that direction, purchases, I'm sorry, what's that? Is that better? Purchases that are even like under $3,000 could be coming to you for appraisals. We do attorney services through this, consultant services. So I just want council to give us clear direction, and I want you to know how I'm going to interpret it.
Councilor Graham, you still have the floor, then Councilman Lum.
Can we put language in here that excludes anything that is under $25,000? I don't know if that would be
I think there's a lot of,
reasonable.
Unless you're making an amendment that's.
That I'm going to make an amendment. I'd like to, it sounds like I'm hearing from staff that it would be helpful that if there's something, sole source that's under $25,000, that it would make sense to
Let me
put
suggest
that
that
in there.
that's inconsistent with the removal amendment, and that
Right,
if the
it is.
amendment is passed, you can then add in a carve-out for that purpose.
That's fine.
If I could, though, that exclusion, or that is already there under the
That's
charter,
what I thought.
because it addresses procurements under $25,000. What this ordinance does is it tightens, the way it's written, but without the changes, it tightens the requirement that anything that's, any supplies or equipment that are not competitively bid have to come to council regardless of the cost, or the price, as it's written right now. And it does not provide any means for us to bring a services contract that may offer an opportunity or benefit to the city without competitive bidding to council unless it's modified to include either strikeout of supplies or equipment, or add in supplies, equipment, or services. And I also, just since Ms. Blake is here, she could take a few moments and talk about what we're trying to do in terms of reconciling procedures and ordinances.
So I started in October of 2017, and since that time, issues have come up at various points that drew my attention to ordinance changes that we needed to make to ensure that the ordinances actually reflected our practice. So this is why you're looking at revisions to Chapter 11 regarding the risk fund, revisions to Chapter 13 regarding special assessments, and then several changes to Chapter 14 regarding contracting. So that's the genesis of all this. If anyone has any more questions, I can answer those.
Councilor Long.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Right, Ms. Blake, I have no problems with section 1, 3, and 4, but the major issue is with this section 2, section 1:316, again, paragraph 4, which is the section outlining when no competitive bidding is allowed. And just to clear the air, again, the existing section, I don't need, there are no circumstances, can't imagine there are any circumstances, under which I would support non-competitively bidding. So in the existing section for supplies and equipment, competitive bidding is not required if there's a recommendation from the administrator to waive the requirement and council approves. Okay, that's good control. It states procurement of supplies or equipment where competitive bidding is not required by law or city charter and either clearly is not practical or no advantage would result to the city by requiring competitive bidding, the council, upon the written recommendation of the city administrator, may authorize the execution of a contract without competitive bidding. For professional services, there are no exceptions allowed. A good thing. What's proposed? For any purchases, supplies and equipment, or contract for professional services, the city administrator could waive the competitive bidding requirement if he or she determines that such bidding, quote, is not practical or of no advantage to the city, period, end quote. So let's compare the existing ordinance, which permits the administrator to waive the competitive bidding on purchase of supplies and equipment. Again, waiving is possible now, but only if the administrator formally requests council approval and council approves. For professional services contract, waiving is not possible now under the charter, but apparently it's the city practice. I'm not sure how that evolution happened or who authorized it, and, I mean, if this code codifies and clarifies the current procedure as was stated at the beginning, then the current procedure, has been in violation of the code, but more importantly, it's poor policy, poor practice. And so I hope you support the amendment to eliminate the proposed changes to 1:316, paragraph 4. Again, this is item 2, items 1, 3, and 4 seem A-okay, and just cleanup of language.
Councilor Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just so this doesn't get lost in the shuffle, I want to make what hopefully will be a friendly amendment to the amendment. In the first sentence of paragraph 4, I would hope that we would keep of supplies or equipment, but amend it briefly to read of supplies, equipment, or services, as was the city administrator's desire, and I heard some acquiescence of Councilmember Lum. So that first sentence of paragraph 4 would read, procurement of supplies, equipment, or services where competitive bidding or formal solicitation is not required by law, et cetera, et cetera.
I don't support that.
Okay,
Let's deal with that afterwards, perhaps.
fair enough.
Mr. Lazarus.
I would, again, just remind council that the city charter establishes a $25,000 threshold, which by its nature entrust the administrator and the administration to establish a procurement process to handle smaller procurements in the interest of good business practice. It doesn't mean that there's not accountability in the process. It just means that small procurements should be able to be done more rapidly and on a more timely basis.
Councilmember Eaton.
My reading of the city charter is that there's no requirement that a contract be approved if it's for an amount less than $25,000, but that does not exempt that contract from competitive bidding under the current wording of this ordinance.
I agree.
And that's what we would like to maintain. It's okay to not bring every small contract to us for approval, but if you have a small contract under $25,000, you still need to go through a process of competitive bidding. That's just good process, and I don't think that the charter can be, in good faith, read differently than that. Thank you.
I guess I'm going to weigh in a little bit. I'm going to vote against this amendment, and I think it'd be useful to then tease apart after the amendment is voted on, and perhaps if it passes, whether we could seek to have services bundled back into the existing language to allow that to be engaged in the ordinary course. And then I think it's useful to consider whether the $25,000 is a threshold under which we would accept competitive bidding. I don't think anybody was suggesting that the $25,000 charter provision already gives the administrator or staff any authority other than engaging the contract, executing the contract without bringing it towards council. I think the point is that the charter sets $25,000 as a threshold under which ordinary or different procedures are a threshold under which extraordinary procedures are acceptable. That is, the administration taking care of it on its own lights, on its own initiative, in order to provide for the efficient administration of the city, something which benefits absolutely everybody. And so, it strikes me that if we're going to take this out, as I kind of reading the room, it looks like we might, maybe we will, who knows, that giving staff the ability to no bid some services and providing a $25,000 threshold would be, for want of a better word, a reasonable compromise. A place where we would give staff the opportunity to do the work that we ask of them, while at the same time committing them to competitive bidding larger projects. This is now on the amendment still. Councilmember Nelson.
I have a question, and maybe I'm backing up to a really basic premise here. If what we're talking about is a bidding process on every contract, even contracts that we expect there to be only a single vendor for, what would that look like? I mean, how much extra work is that to just go through the motions of a bidding process where we anticipate that there'll be no results from it?
Let me clarify. We do go out for bid and proposals. That is the expectation on virtually everything. It is the exception when we do not. That process, depending on how complex the bid or proposal is, could be a couple of weeks to, honestly, if it ends up coming to council, it could be a couple of months. It's not really inconsequential. And to give you a little tangible nature of what this means, so some of the items, for example, that can go on sole source are where we have, say, a single manufacturer related to, a particular part. We have that, I think, in our wastewater plant or water plant, and some pumps. It might be an authorized dealer for the area that we're in. That might work for like a fire truck with parts or things like that. We have situations where when we acquire an asset, there's a warranty that comes with it, and if you don't use the vendor that you acquired it from, you might void the warranty, so we might choose to use that as sole source. There are a lot of reasons like that are examples of how we kind of make that trade-off of do we go try to seek a sole source or not. So staff is regularly trying to get the best dollar value for the community, And it's really the exception when we don't do those actions. It's either a necessity of time, which we typically bring back to you and let you know that, or items like I just discussed.
Thank you. No, I probably have, but
I think you've probably gone twice on the amendment. Is there further discussion of the amendment? Do people feel where they are, they know where they are on that?
I will save my comments for afterwards, because I can provide a little history on the $25,000 limit was a budget amendment for the charter that I brought forward at this table in the 90s. It hadn't been raised in years. Anyway, I'll give you a little history on how we got to where we are at.
Further discussion on the amendment? The amendment, just for clarity, is the removal of the changes to section 1(3)(16), paragraph 4. Is that correct? Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Remlali on the amendment to remove the proposed changes.
Councilmember Remlali.
Yes.
Councilmember Hayner.
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister.
Yes?
Councilmember Griswold.
Yes.
Councilmember Lum.
Yes.
Councilmember Grand.
No.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Nope.
Mayor Taylor.
No.
Councilmember Eaton.
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson.
No.
Councilmember Smith.
No.
The amendment carries.
Further discussion of the main motion is amended. Councilmember Ackerman.
Now with the amendment having carried, I would move to insert words of supplies, equipment, or services into the first sentence of paragraph 4, so that first sentence would read procurement of supplies, equipment, or services where competitive bidding where competitive bidding is not required by law or city charter, and either is not practical or.
Well, let's just
Yeah.
perhaps, I think we could conceptualize, add the issue, add services to supplies or equipment. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Hayner. Perhaps we can keep discussions of that short. Councilmember Lum?
Okay, I will just say that for purchases below the $25,000 threshold, the argument I'm hearing from the city is that it's one of expediency or, minimizing staff workload and requirements. And the fact that the city administrator has delegated the authority of service area administrators to waive competitive bidding, that authority is vested in the city administrator. The fact that he's done this already has compromised the intent of the charter for expediency. In terms of the purchases below $25,000, per the responses that we received, the administrator, again, indicated he's delegated this authority to them to decide if competitive bidding is practical or of any advantage to the city. So that's already compromising the expectation. This $25,000 was approved by a charter referendum. And again, we have 592 examples of no bidding since December of 2015, and that is a relatively small percentage of purchases. As Mr. Crawford noted, it's about 4%. It's still a lot of money. It adds up to about $11 million. So, the bottom line for me is that any changes that loosen or compromise the competitive bidding expectation, which this amendment, I think, clearly does, it's terrible. It's bad budget discipline. And, I will stand for fiscal discipline, fiscal stewardship any day of the month, week, or year over expediency. Thanks.
Further discussion of the amendment?
I do.
Councilmember Ackerman?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll support this amendment, and I'll support the ordinance amendment as a whole. There's a difference between fiscal discipline and fiscal responsibility in this case. This reminds me of a scenario in which the federal government was able to find millions, tens of millions of dollars in savings through the Reagan administration, first Bush administration, and then into the Clinton administration by encouraging all purchases in the federal government under $25,000 to be put on credit cards. The reason for doing this, which was first piloted in one administration under Republican Party and then pushed even more aggressively under Clinton and Gore, was simply because procurement does a really good job of doubling or tripling the cost of small acquisitions. And the ability to create internal efficiencies is something that looks across parties and it is a good identifier. And the decision for it to be the $25,000 threshold is something that's adopted at all levels of government. And I'd like to see us be able to respond to changing environments, changing demands of constituents faster, and often that means needing to look to new equipment, we need to look to new services to do so. So I'll gladly make it more flexible if it means more efficiency. And that, you know, in this case, I think discipline and responsibility may be two different things, because I think by creating some more flexibility will save a lot of time and effort on the part of staff when delivering service.
If I can observe, I think that's what, Mr. Lazarus?
I just want to be very clear, because there's an allegation made that I have compromised the city's procurement. I still review, I still sign every single contract this city issues, whether it's over $25,000 or under. I have not delegated that, I have not waived that, but nor am I an expert in everything that we buy. And to have the service area administrators have the ability to look and see where, in the many cases that Mr. Crawford talked about, where it may be to our advantage, is good process, ensures the appropriate degree of expertise. But I in no way have compromised the integrity of the city's procurement process. I review every contract, I sign every contract, my signature has meaning, and I dispute the comment that I've compromised the process.
Just want to make sure that the amendment relates exclusively to the issue of services, not the issue of the $25,000. Perhaps can we have a further discussion on the introduction of services to the language? Or merely a vote, but Councilmember Ramlawi.
I appreciate Councilmember Ackerman's willingness to try to bridge the gap here, as he has been quite a bit. You know, services account for over, I don't know, it depends on what part of the country you're in, over 50% of the economy. I think, you know, this is something that perhaps, as was already stated, would bring the ordinance in to what is actually reality. And I will support this amendment, and sometimes, you know, we just gotta trust that folks are doing the job they're hired to do. And delays do cost money. And so I'll just leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Further discussion of the services-related amendment? Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Ramlawi.
Councilmember Ramlawi.
Yes.
Councilmember Hayner.
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister.
Yes.
Councilmember Griswold.
Yes.
Councilmember Lum.
No.
Councilmember Grant.
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Yes.
Mayor Taylor.
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton.
No.
Councilmember Nelson.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
The amendment carries.
I've heard some conversation at the table and participated in some conversation in the table with respect to perhaps considering a $25,000 exclusion to this provision. That is to say, the notion of expanding the instances under which we could go forward with no bid contracts under the city administrator's imprimatur for such contracts under $25,000. I don't feel comfortable devising that on the fly here. Let me suggest this. If someone would move to postpone this for a week to give staff the opportunity to rewrite this provision, which would, take into account that $25,000 threshold, then that would be great.
I don't understand what you're requesting.
I've heard at the table that there seems to be some support, maybe yes, maybe no, for giving staff additional flexibility with respect to contracts that are under $25,000. That is to say, additional no-bid flexibility with respect to such contracts. I don't feel like we can draft that on the fly here. Let's perhaps send this, postpone this till our next meeting. Ask staff to bring forward an amendment to this amendment, that is, which reflects the $25,000 threshold, and then we'll consider at that time. Moved by Councilmember Hayner. Postponement to next meeting?
No, I wasn't going to move that. I had a question, but that's okay.
And if it would be postponed, it would obviously be postponed as amended, correct?
Well,
Absolutely.
that was my question.
I'm sorry.
actually.
Yes, it's postponed as amended, but there would be another amended. It's postponed as amended. The staff would have the opportunity to create language which would serve as, which would be.
First reading.
Yes. Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If this is first reading, could I suggest that in the interim, between now and the second reading, some potential amendment language be drafted? I'd be, if it's something that's amenable to me, I'd be happy to move it. It would move it back to first reading, and we could go from there.
I think yes, that's basically right. So
Okay. So I would say vote on first reading tonight and then I would look to follow up with the city attorney's office to get potential amendment language that would,
the
if passed.
challenge with that is that brings us to a second, we will then have a second reading at the next meeting.
And then if I move an amendment that is substantive in nature and that passes, it would be the first amendment that night, and we would then move it to a second reading.
Correct, but it
at
gives
the
us a
next
public hearing.
Understood.
I mean,
Would people be upset about two public hearings on this issue?
I don't anticipate,
A hypothetical second public hearing?
Councilmember Grand.
I just don't anticipate the masses showing up for this type of public hearing. Maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, you can all blame me. But I think it's, for all intents and purposes, basically the same timeline as Councilmember Ackerman suggested, so. But I
withdraw the suggestion.
I'm happy either way, but I certainly support staff going back and looking at this because the last thing we want to do is slow our city down and question your judgment on things like $3,000 expenditures.
All right, so perhaps then, unless I'm hearing a great groundswell to postpone, we'll move forward with further discussion as amended, and then perhaps a vote. Further discussion as amended. We'll move forward then with a vote, and everyone should know there's some expectation that there will be an amendment offered at the next meeting with respect to the $25,000 threshold,
It needs to be presented well in advance.
as early as possible.
So this is a vote on postponement?
Pardon me, there's been no postponement offered. This is a straight-up vote on the resolution as amended. If passed as amended, it'll go to second reading and public hearing. At that time, it is anticipated that there would be an amendment offered. That amendment offered, if passed, would move the whole thing back to
First
first
Gotcha,
reading.
okay. Sorry.
And
Councilwoman Sloan.
no worries at all, then a subsequent second reading.
Okay.
Councilor Lum.
And just a heads up, I am concerned about where this is headed directionally, and knowing the genesis of why we have this, had this initial proposal before us to make this competitive bidding change. I may be reintroducing a resolution to require competitive bidding for solid waste contracts. We had a policy like that was established with the approval of a resolution I happened to bring forward back in the 1990s. The Ann Arbor Chamber of Commerce Board unanimously supported it, and it was unanimously supported here on City Council. And we had vastly more Democrats than Republicans serving on this council, but they all approved it. And it did lead to, as I gave you that example from 1996, when the city was saved over $1 million because we competitively bid that collection contract. Yeah, we did go back and negotiate, but it saved the city $1 million+. And there were lots of other efficiencies that accrued to our taxpayers and forced us to be good stewards of their dollars. So, again, depending on where this directionally leads, and my expectation is that we will see this amendment relatively soon. Because competitive bidding is just, it's like the core of what I believe in, and I just don't want to see that eroded.
Further discussion, the amendment of the resolution is amended. Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Umlawi.
Councilmember Rumali,
Yes.
Councilmember Hayner,
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister,
Yes?
Councilmember Griswold,
Yes.
Councilmember Lum,
Yes.
Councilmember Grant,
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton,
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Motion carries.
I'm a dreamer, and so let's move on. I bet you we can do it. DC1, resolution to appoint Anand Ameri to the Independent Community Police Oversight Commission, moved by Councilmember Umlawi, second by Councilmember Lum. Discussion, please, of DC1. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It's approved. DC3, resolution to exercise a right of first refusal to purchase 1146 South Maple Road for $260,000, moved by Councilmember Grant, seconded by Councilmember Smith. Discussion, please, of DC3. Councilmember Hayner.
I know there's some folks here who might want to speak to this, and I probably would have to ask them a question or two. And so I guess my question would be, can someone come up here and tell us the value of this to the city?
Who's the lucky person?
Well, or the community at large. I mean, we're the ones that have to purchase this if we exercise this right. Is that not correct?
So, hi, I'm Aubrey Patino, I'm the Executive Director of Avalon Housing. We would pursue development of this parcel, and we anticipate being able to develop approximately 14 more units of affordable housing on the site.
This is as an extension of an existing development, is
Yeah,
that
so it's
correct?
adjacent to what we will call the Hickory Way development, which is 2 phases, which will total 70 units of affordable housing. And so it's adjacent to that parcel.
I know there was some Q&A on this, and I'm sorry maybe I should just go back and read it and just let it move forward without me, but I missed a few things about this, but if the city's going to purchase this, and then we're going to turn around and donate it, or it's going to be purchased from us, or how's that going down? Anybody?
Perhaps we could have some of our indomitable staff.
I'm just curious as to the transaction flow.
We're acquiring it.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Well, if we exercise our right of first refusal and agree to purchase this property, somehow for Avalon to develop on there, then I'm just wondering what the transaction flow is. They're going to buy it from us, we're going to donate it to them, what's going to happen?
Well, there hasn't been any determination about that, and that's really up to essentially the council. You don't have a recommendation in front of you on that today, but if we were to acquire the property, we would start, more detailed dialogue with Avalon. We've had some initial dialogue with them, but usually when they develop property as appropriate, they buy properties on option contracts, and those option contracts are conditioned on various entitlements, including any sort of requirement of the city, such as site planning or rezoning. And so, although they purchase properties right away, usually the transaction cost and them paying for the property doesn't happen until further down the line. And so if this was handled similar to other transactions that Avalon has done, the city would actually be holding the property for some time, even if we enter into a contract for them to buy it. And then at the time they determine that the project is feasible, they have the city approvals necessary, as well as they establish their financing with whatever financing sources they use, which usually include things like federal home loan bank loans, low-income tax credits. That's the time when they would actually pay the balance and the majority of that to the city. And so in front of you tonight, this is not a deal, if you will. It's simply just an execution of the right. And so if the city made the decision to do that, we would have to then work with Avalon to come up with a plan for that property to be transferred to them at that time. And again, if the city wants to contribute in some way, sell it to them at a lower value, contribute, in terms of some sort of kind of grant assistance for the project, that could be worked out as well.
Thank you.
for this, Councilmember Lum.
Thank you, and thanks, Mr. McDonald. So this, according to this, it is an interesting opportunity. To be honest, I have mixed feelings on this one. 'Cause, you know, it's on the, there's the positive side of the acquisition ledger. I don't think that there's a big financial risk to the city of our losing money if we acquire it for $260,000 and then resell it later. I mean, there's always some market risk, of course, but I don't see a major downside below $260,000 in the amount we could sell a, 1.15 acre property in Scioto, or the city if it's annexed. Obviously, Avalon has a genuine interest in acquiring the property for one of its affordable housing projects. It's not a commitment, and it's not now. They've indicated it's likely a 2-year timeframe, I believe, before they could acquire it. But the interest does seem real, and, and Avalon has also indicated to us they don't expect it to be donated for a project. On the negative side, I don't think the city should be in the real estate business, regardless of the motivation. And, I think we should only make real estate acquisitions if we have a firm plan to resell the property, and we shouldn't be buying property to sit on it, to hold it. And so setting a precedent of just going out, acquiring a property, sitting on it, that's a concern I have. And one of the responses to the council questions was that if the city didn't purchase the property, it likely would be annexed, which of course would bring in a bit of tax revenue. And then the last concern I have is it does feel like it's a little bit of a gun to the head, if you will. I mean, that's not anyone's fault. It's the nature of the right of first refusals. But it does feel that there are a number of open issues here, including the well and septic, possible hookup to city utilities. Those are all things that have to be considered. So, I mean, I see valid arguments on both sides of this question.
Got Councilmembers Eaton, Smith, Grand, and then perhaps we can move on. Councilmember Eaton.
So this property is in the 5th Ward, but it's actually just around the corner from where I live, and so I'm familiar with both the property and the property owner, a friend of mine. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to acquire a piece of property adjacent to an Avalon project that's already moving forward, and I'll be supporting this because it's not very often you get to expand the potential of one of our affordable housing projects. I think that this doesn't really present us with much risk. I don't like to engage in real estate speculation any more than anybody else does here, but I believe that should we take this on and it doesn't end up in the hands of Avalon, we wouldn't have any trouble turning around and just selling it on the open market. So I'll be supporting this. I hope others do as well.
Councilmember Smith.
This is a no-brainer. I don't even view this as speculative. We have a wonderful nonprofit community partner who's working to provide affordable housing, which is our greatest need. This is an adjacent property, as Councilmember Eaton noted. I fully support this. I think that we can certainly work together. I mean, this body has said no to a lot of market rate affordable housing development in the last quarter. I think that this is a very low-risk way for us to start moving some of these units forward. I don't think we've had an easier vote this year. Thanks.
Councilmember Grant.
Thank you. I wholly concur with what was just said by the two council members before me. This is a partner that's a very well-known entity to us, who's been a partner with us for decades in the city, and well, it's been said from some that they don't want to make a commitment. I just want to publicly state that that so long as the project moves forward, you have my commitment all the way through, and it doesn't, and my hope would be actually that we could make it or explore ways through various funding sources to make it even more affordable for Avalon to move this project forward.
Further, Councilmember Hayner and Grainer. Grainer. Griswold.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
Yeah, I concur with those statements. I guess what Councilwoman Graham just said is kind of what I was getting at with those questions is my many previous votes for affordable housing have shown I'm supportive of these concepts. I guess I also am wondering, because when we looked at one of the Housing Commission projects, and I was shocked to find an enormous amount of you might say, payback, where the city was charging them market rate for plan review and all these kinds of other things. And when this gets annexed, then these fees would come due, right, and all that. And so we have to look for, I just say, as we move forward with this, and I hope that we do, that we do need to look for ways to, because it's our property all of a sudden, can we waive some of these things? Are there places where we can dig in there and give ourselves a discount for doing business with ourselves, essentially, in a lawful way that doesn't encourage others to ask, other private for-profit developers to ask for the same type of discounts for services. Because I think that we have to look at every kind of angle on this, and the idea that any of this money that we have for affordable housing is multiplied when it's put into the system is pretty powerful. And so, if we can waive $10,000 worth of connection fees or whatever, then that gives them that much more to work with in the future, especially for services, which we just approved some service increases or payments for services to Avalon tonight. And so, yes, please do vote yes on this.
Councilmember Griswold.
I fully support this. I just have one question about the number of units. Does Avalon have any properties now with 84 units?
We do not. That would be the highest density development that we have done thus far. We are the on-site service provider to Miller Manor, which is a 106-unit complex.
Right, okay.
And we are looking to integrate a similar model for services, so we do have a 24/7 on-site component so that we are able to sort of mitigate concerns around density.
Okay, great. And is this designed for families mainly?
It is
as
not,
opposed-
actually.
Oh,
It's mainly for single adults.
Oh, okay, that's even better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Councilmember Amlawi.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. And yes, just echoing the sentiments of most of my colleagues. We are in a crisis when it comes to affordable housing. We have few options. This is one that comes in at a price point and risk where is very palatable for me to support. And yeah, we are criticized quite often of not doing enough to alleviate the problems with affordable housing. And we've been waiting patiently for something to come across the desk like this that makes sense and will have a great effect. So happy to support this, and hopefully something good will come from it. But I do have concerns as to the fund balances and transfers and making sure we keep those things above board. And if this was to be sold to the Ann Arbor Housing Commission, that we do use the money that's been put aside for affordable housing to offset the purchase price, essentially giving the Housing Commission time to get its ducks in order with pretty much a no-interest loan. So hopefully it all works out, and we see good things from it. Thank you.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. We're flying through the agenda, but I'll be brief. I want to second the remarks of Councilmember Hayner. On the property adjacent Hickory Way, the city actually was able to grant $130,000 to help with their tap fees for the original project. But I think if we can do some creative thinking on now potentially being an invested partner or a landed partner in this, of how we could maybe try to double down and help them even more. I think that's a really great idea and would have broader support on council. So to any staff who's listening, I hope you hear that as encouragement.
Further
Thanks.
discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It's approved. 11 council members present, all voting in the affirmative, thus satisfying the 8-vote requirement. DS1, Resolution Number 2, Duvarin Road Sidewalk Project Special Assessment, moved by Councilmember Hayner, seconded by Councilmember Grand. Discussion, please, of DS1. Councilmember Hayner.
I know I had some constituents reach out to me because part of that, well, actually all of it, falls in Ward 1. And, but when they went back and took a look at it and they separated these projects out, it really made a lot more sense. And hopefully that the folks out there that were concerned about the cost especially will find that they were protected by their initial purchase and agreements in that areas, and that the cost is quite low for most of these folks. It's an actual case where we're really spreading it out among all of them. And so the other reasons that were given I felt were misguided, and so I'm gonna support this in spite of some concerns my constituents had. So my apologies to those who didn't want sidewalks coming up to their house.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It's approved. DS2, Resolution Number 3, establishing a public hearing on the Duvarin Improvements Project, moved by Councilmember Griswold, seconded by Councilmember Hayner. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved. We have communications today from our city attorney.
No, Mayor.
We have before us the clerk's report of communications, petitions, and referrals. May I have a motion, please, to approve the clerk's report? Moved by Councilmember Lum, seconded by Councilmember Grand. Discussion of the clerk's report. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Clerk's report is approved. We now come to public comment general time. Public comment general time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment general time, one need not have signed up in advance. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. And finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council, we'd be delighted to provide it to you. Is there anyone who'd like to speak at public comment?
Hi, my name is Edward Vilmetti. I come to council tonight too late to make up any of your minds about road diets and bicycle safety and other sorts of things that reduce the flow of traffic and slow the flow of traffic through town so that people who are not driving have an easier time of it. I know that this is a controversial issue on council. I know that several members of council have gotten support in the past from members of the National Motorist Association, which is a national group that advocates for motorist rights, sort of like the National Rifle Association advocates for rifle owners' rights, with some of the same effect. And this is particularly of interest to me today, of all days, because a friend of mine got hit on his bicycle right near my house, down the street that my older son bikes down. He's okay. He didn't file a police report, I don't think. He might still. So he'll probably go in the category of bicycle car crashes that are not logged on UD10 reports and thus do not go into the local or statewide analysis of where things are dangerous and things to be improved. But I do know that several of you listen to the National Motorist Association. I know that several of you have gotten money from the National Motorist Association. And I just want to, speak up for people who walk and ride their bike. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at public comment? Seeing no one, public comment is closed. Are there communications from council? Councilmember Griswold.
As I've said many times, I've been working on pedestrian safety since 1995. And I support many road diets that are done according to federal specifications, such as on Glacier Way, such as on Green Road. But the three projects that we have referred back to the Transportation Commission are not typical road diets where you're going from 4 lanes to 3 lanes with a left turn lane and bike lanes. These are very complex and need further evaluation. So I hope that by sending this back and trying to have a good, inclusive process is in no way an indication that we do not value pedestrian safety.
Councilmember Lum.
Yeah, I'd just like to share that, my colleagues and I are persuaded by, some of us, I'd like to think we all are persuaded by feedback we receive from our citizens. And a campaign contribution is not a defining indicator of, or guide on our thinking. And I frankly am offended by that insinuation that was made. And, we are all grateful for the many contributions that we all receive when we run for office. And we've all been fortunate. People have been very generous. And to pick out one individual out of hundreds is an unfair, unjust, I know you're nodding in disagreement, but, and I shouldn't react in this way, but it really is, your insinuation is, the insinuation that my colleagues and I are controlled, guided by that one input, a contribution. I think better of all of my colleagues up here than what that insinuation suggests. Thanks.
Councilmember Hayner.
I would just like to say that I've never received any funds from a National Motors Association, nor have I ever received any funds from the NRA.
Further discussion, further communications from council. Do we have a closed session today?
Mayor, we do. We have it under the Open Meetings Act, under pending litigation. 3 matters tonight. The first is Stolberg and the Ann Arbor Neighbors for Responsible Development versus the city, Washtenaw County Circuit Court case. Second, the case of Trinitas versus the city of Ann Arbor, also a Washtenaw County Circuit Court case. And the third is Cervantes versus the city, federal lawsuit.
May I have a motion, please, to go into closed session on that basis? Moved by Councilmember Ramalloni, second by Councilmember Nelson. Do we need further elaboration, Mr. Postma?
Further
Elaboration of purposes in connection with the motion?
The purpose is pending litigation.
Thank you.
Yeah, under the Open Meetings Act. Excuse me.
Thank you. Further discussion? Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Ramalloni.
Councilmember Ramallali.
Yes.
Councilmember Hayner.
Yes.
Councilmember Bannister.
Yes.
Councilmember Griswold.
Yes.
Councilmember Lum. Councilmember Grand.
Yes.
Councilmember Ackerman. Mayor Taylor.
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton.
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith. Yes. Motion carries.
We're in closed session.
Your mic is off.
One more vote. One more vote. All in favor, going back into open session?
Yes.
Aye. We are back in open session. May I have a motion to adjourn, please? Moved by Councilmember Smith, seconded by Councilmember Grumlowy. Discussion. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.